Welcome to the sixth edition of Halifax Black Film Festival, founded by the Fabian Colas Foundation and co-produced by the TD Bank in collaboration with Global News. The festival will be available to all of you between February 24th and 27th, so please make sure you get your all access pass at halifaxblackfilm.com. My name is
Hmm.
Juanita Peters, and I welcome you to this conversation. Before we get started, I want to remind you that we're in Mi'kmaq territory. That was the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. We acknowledge the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory, recognizing that we are all treaty people. Tonight's
Mhm.
conversation is all about Halifax meets Hollywood, creating a TV series, and we're going to talk about that. What does it take to create a TV series? What is a showrunner? What does a showrunner do? The panel will be divided into two separate conversations, and the first part is about the showrunner's work. We have the pleasure of having with us Selwyn Hinds tonight, a young man who was born in Georgetown, Guyana, made his way to New York at the age of 14 with his family, a Princeton graduate. He's an American screenwriter, comic book writer. He's been a journalist, former editor, and currently he is the showrunner and writer of the television adaptation of the novel Washington Black for 20th Century Fox. And he's also recently served as a writer producer on Jordan Peele's new iteration of The Twilight Zone for CBS All Access. My gosh, who gets to work with Jordan Peele? Let's start
He's a,
there. Let's
he's a,
talk a
he's
little
a
bit
great
about
guy.
that, right?
Right.
I can't imagine that being anything but fun.
No, it was look, it was fantastic. I am a real genre kid at heart. I grew up loving comic books and sci-fi and just speculative fiction in general. The
Yeah.
Twilight Zone was a huge part of my TV diet. As a youth, as a kid. If you grow up in New York, you will know that with certain times of the year that Channel 11 WPIX runs these Twilight Zone marathons and they play endlessly. So having the chance to take part in the revival was great, and I wrote an episode that was pretty well received. It was a very topical episode about police brutality and sort of how that works within the context of a Twilight Zone world. Yeah, so it was a plus on all measures for me.
Well, and being able to talk about the things that matter and talk about it from a real perspective, you know, things
Mm,
that you would have seen, you would have, hopefully, you didn't have to face that yourself, but we certainly know
mm.
that we see it, on a daily basis. So, how do you get that call from a Jordan Peele, or is it from Jordan Peele? How do you get that
Yeah,
call?
that's not directly from Jordan. Breaking into Hollywood in general as a writer is, to put it in perspective, I tell people because you get this question all the time: How do I break in? How do I do it? And it's
Mm,
helpful to put it in perspective first. And there are more there are more members of the Major League Baseball union than there are working members of the WGA.
yeah.
So if you think about doing what I do as akin to becoming a sort of top flight professional athlete, it's about the same thing, right? Just in terms of the ratio of who makes it to who doesn't, in terms of the dedication and the effort, and just how hard it is to do. And then in terms of getting staffed on a show, and this show in particular, a show goes up, and then the showrunners, the producers send a call out to agents and reps and say, I'm looking for these kinds of people and this kind of thing. In my case, I hadn't been doing much television. I'm a feature writer by background. I write movies. And my Jordan Peele's company had been in touch with my managers for actually quite some time, saying, "Hey, we'd love to just work with someone when we get an opportunity." And I was between feature projects. I had about 6 weeks available, and the writers' room had started a couple months before. But I was like, well, I got 6 weeks free. If I can parachute in, kind of take part, have a good time, write an episode, and parachute back out, that would be great. And it worked out that way. I mean, it's not the it's not the typical way it gets done.
But
Um,
it's such an anomaly though too, because it's not just difficult to get a job in the writers' room.
yeah,
You're also dealing with sci-fi. You know what I mean? How many
yeah,
people do you know of color who work in the sci-fi world? So
yeah. Not
that in
enough.
itself is extraordinary too. Not enough is right. And I
Yeah,
probably have only known three that
yeah,
were strongly attached to that genre. So that
yeah.
very very proud of you for that even.
Oh, thank you, thank
So
you, thank
let's talk a little bit about, are there more opportunities for BIPOC writers today?
you. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. That is true. And look, I'm not, I'm not old enough in Hollywood terms to remember sort of the past waves, right? Like things have come in waves before. There was a wave in the '90s when sort of
Yes.
black content was popular. I was in magazines then, but I certainly know now just by virtue of my own position and a number of my own colleagues who look like me, who are showrunners and and creators. Even by virtue of our existence and the fact that we are creating shows and creating opportunities for writers, that's a positive factor. But even beyond that, there is, look, it's always a fight uphill, and for some people it's lip service, and for some people it's more genuine. But in the last few years, coming out of all of the sort of incidents around race that have roiled the United States in the last few years, our business has made a commitment, some better than others, to get better, to do better. So you've seen much more diverse writing rooms, and it's creepingly slow progress on many fronts, but I think it is
Mm.
real progress.
I do too. I do too. And not just in America and Canada as well.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
and you can tell in the writers' room when things come to the screen and they feel real, right?
Yeah.
Because that's real language, that's real experience telling
Yeah.
those stories,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so it is a treat, to sit in there. And I don't know, Selwyn, if you've been here when a black audience was in, because they talk to the screen. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So we talked about, you mentioned, being a showrunner and how
Yeah.
hard it is to get into that. Let's talk about what a showrunner is.
My God. Wow. A showrunner is exactly what it sounds like. It is the person who runs a television show. It is the person for whom the buck stops with you. It is not always the person who created the show. Oftentimes not oftentimes, but you might have a situation where you're a, quote unquote younger writer, but you have an idea that's fantastic. You have a script that's fantastic, and you get paired up with a more experienced showrunner to run the show. That's not the case. For me, I'm the creator as well, but a showrunner is the person for whom all aspects of a television show, which is just like a giant corporation, right, with separate departments, whether it's I mean, first and foremost, it is the development of the pilot and steering the pilot script and getting that to the point where the pilot's picked up, or where you get, the authorization to open up a writing room, right? And then you hire all the writers, and then that's another several months of you and the writers, and you write all the scripts, and then from there you try to get your green light to go to production. Then when it's production, now you're hiring everyone, right? So from the directors to the DP to costuming to locations to production design, right? A TV show is made up of multiple people and multiple departments, all run by department heads who all service a different aspect of the television, and it's their creative collaboration that results in what you see. So there's an aspect of the show and his job that, I mean, the writing is the foundation of it all, but it's the least of it, right? In some ways, you've got to be a manager, you've got to be a leader of people, you've got to be a bit of a conductor. Like I look at it as hiring the best people you can and getting out of their way and steering them, sort of
Yeah.
tapping them left or right, when necessary. But it's intense. It's an extraordinarily stressful job. You are responsible, in my case, for the budgets that can run into the hundreds of millions of dollars that you are
Mm,
responsible for,
yeah.
right?
And you're
Uh,
you're 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 looking at everything from the top down, right? You're
yeah,
you're
yeah,
looking at
yeah,
everything from the style of the show to the
yeah,
the
yeah.
costumes to
Hmm.
um Yeah, it's a lot to handle for, and I
Yeah,
often watch showrunners and think they must have a massive brain to keep
you need
all of
a
this intact.
you need a ton of support,
Yeah.
because you can burn yourself out. You need a really good or a couple of really good number twos. You need great department heads. You need great admin support, and you've also got to know when and how to pace yourself. In my case, the show I'm doing is basically going to be in production for 7 months across three countries and two continents.
Mm.
It's a lot of work, and we generally run 10, 12, 13-hour days, sometimes 6 days a week. So it's a really, you sort of got to know when to pull on the reins, when to pace, yourself. But ultimately, your job is to land this gigantic plane safely on the tarmac. So several months from now, it is I'm the person who goes to the network, says, here are the 9 episodes of your season, and then I'm done.
So why would I want to be a showrunner, Selwyn?
you
Why would
you
I?
have to ask yourself that. I mean, people for different reasons. I mean, some people it is the television writing can be a very hierarchical structure, right? And for some people, it's like being in the military, right? It's
Mm.
the last rung on the ladder is general, right? The last rung on the ladder for TV is showrunner, right? In the army, you begin as a private. In TV, you begin as a staff writer. You climb your way up the ranks over the years, over the years, over the years, and so for some people, it's just sort of like, well, I want to, advance in the job until I become a general. For some people like me, it's more lateral, especially in the last several years. For people who did not spend 20 years climbing up the TV ladder, but who achieved writing success in movies or some other. It's usually movies. Mostly. Although people have come from other writing fields, say the theater, right, or but
Hmm.
usually those people tend to get supported by at least partnered up with a television veteran, right? Because writing for the screen is so different. But you can. So that's what happened in my case, right? I've been a feature writer and sort of moved parallel to becoming a showrunner. I think you become a showrunner because you have just the desire to make sure that you steer your creative idea from a tiny seed to a full-grown plant, right? It's creative ownership and authorship in Hollywood is very hard. There are many, 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 many cooks and many chefs, in the kitchen, and the most power. It's a bit of a euphemism, but it's true. The most powerful writing position in Hollywood is in television, and the most powerful writer in television is a showrunner. So for some people, it's really about I just want to see my idea come out the right way. you know, there's only one way to do that. So I think for me, that's probably the biggest part of it is that I have a very definitive creative vision of what I want to see end up on
Yeah.
television.
Yeah.
And to be able to make sure that I can steer my ship through all the steps in order for it to do that kind of requires that I do what I do.
Yeah. And it's making sure that that tone uh,
Hmm.
remains the tone that you're looking for, and
Yeah,
that it, we've all watched shows where in season one looks very different from season two, and
yeah,
and so
yeah,
and that's possibly why, right, that the
yeah.
person at the helm either changed or couldn't quite get that ship steered in the
Hmm.
way that they wanted to. So let's talk about developing a series, Selwyn. So you've
Yeah,
got an idea for a series,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and you're sitting in a dark room, your own personal room, creating this series.
yeah.
How do you know it's a great series? How do you know it's something you want to show and you don't want to hold tight onto because you're too afraid to show it to somebody? How do you know?
That's so interesting. Well, I'll tell you. I'll try to talk about it in the context of how it works for anyone that's a writer, whether you're me or you're home trying to break in a TV. But then there's a point, obviously, where those things diverge, right? Because what I am able to do, you won't quite be able to do at home. But this is what I did 10 years ago, right? 12 years ago. You have this idea. And the first thing is to begin to see, does the idea have legs, right? And the idea can start very simply. It can start from a sense of a character. It can start from something thematic. For me, I tend to start from an emotional place. I tend to ask myself, what is the human condition that makes me feel X, and I want to explore
Mm,
it, right? And then it's about, how do I find the legs on that? And it starts pretty simply for me. If I can write a paragraph about the idea, I feel like it's about these people in this world, driven by these set of circumstances, trying to achieve this thing, right? That's as simple as I can put it. So if I can stand that up in a paragraph, it feels like I have something. Then I
mm,
may expend that to like a page or two, and okay, I feel like I have something now. Then I begin to go into sort of like TV pitch prep mode, right? Which is, whether you're going to pitch it or not, it's just building out the components of what a TV series requires. So if you're pitching a TV series it generally requires a bit of a broad overview about the idea, which is that one paragraph thing. It requires you to go into depth on your key characters. So can I come up with, the characters who are going to push my show along, and more importantly, can I come up with what is their psychological need? I talk about television writing when I'm doing lectures. It's about being internal, right? It's about what's under the skin, not external. It's not about plot. It's not about story. It's not about Johnny robbed the bank. It's about, why did Johnny rob the bank, right? So
mm,
that's the distinction. So I come up with the world, I come up with the characters, I come up with something called the engines, and the engines are really about, or short for dramatic engines, which are simply enough the things that are pushing a series along. If your series doesn't have engines, then you don't have a series, right? You're like, what gets you through 10 episodes? What gets you through 15 episodes? If you're writing an episodic show, like a cop show, the engine is the case of the week, right? So they get a
right.
case of the week, right? If it's a serialized show, the kind of thing that I write, or take Game of Thrones, right? Game of Thrones has several engines, but one of them is, who's going to sit on the Iron Throne, right? Sort of in its political machination. So figuring out the engine of your show is the hardest part, and usually the
Mm,
thing that requires you being a little more experienced to understand sort of what that means. And once I have all those things together, then I can figure out the beats of a pilot, and then and only then do I have something that's called a pitch. And now here is where my experience, and sort of a writer at home, because everything I said before, you as a writer at home can do that, right?
mhm, mhm.
But at the point where I have something, I can then say, hey, agent, manager, I want to take this to HBO, and then I go pitch it, and we see what happens. So
So
that's how.
before people knew your name
Yeah.
and
Before
you're
people knew,
pitching something,
before
let's
people
say,
knew my name and that, I had to go through what all of us have to go through. Everyone has a different break-in story, but everyone has a
yeah,
version of the same thing. It is a
yeah,
version of, I worked my tail off until I ran out of money, until I was sleeping on a friend's car on the free. Everybody has some version of that story, and I
yeah.
do too, right? I didn't decide to come to Hollywood until fairly late in my writing career. I was in my late 30s. I'd already had a successful career as a journalist and a writer under many other iterations, and first it took a number of years in my 30s to get represented. That's sort of the first hurdle to break through from New York. And then once I had an agent and I had a manager, that took me like 4 or 5 years to do. Then I moved to LA. And then it took me another 4 or 5 years to get my first job. So it took me 10 years to break in, really, 10 years until I was being paid as a writer. That's a
Mhm.
long time,
It
and,
is. And
but
I just want to,
it's
Selwyn,
probably
I
like,
want to just sort
yeah,
of talk
go ahead.
about that that process of
Yeah,
writing, and you're
yeah,
writing something that's true to you.
yeah,
And have you ever experienced that point where you're pitching this to somebody who's not of that world, who has not, so they can't quite make the link?
yeah,
How do you get over that and handle that? And
yeah.
um,
Well, yeah, well, the thing is, Hollywood's like baseball in some ways, right? Like, if you're batting 300, you're super successful, right? Because
mhm,
it's a game that's, you hear way more no's than you hear yeses, right? And some of the no's you'll hear are along the lines that you know, that you describe, people who just might not be able to grasp, what you're, with what you're doing. So within that context, I sort of look at it as, I mean, luckily we're in a time where, you know, sort of cultural specificity and diversity is much more open now than it used to
Hmm.
be, right? So that's the first thing to know. And then there's a phrase that I have been using when I talk about story and I talk about picture. I tell younger writers all the time, which is don't shy away from your specificity. Universality is found in specificity, right?
Hmm.
So don't set out to write something that feels so broad and so like, how do I appeal to the, for instance, the white 80-year-old grandmother in Arkansas who's so different than me? Like, don't worry about that. Like, write to your specificity, right? Write to the fact that for me, I had a great grandmother who lived in Georgetown, Guyana, and walked to market every day with a basket on her head and wrapped aloes around my foot when I sprained my ankle, right? Like it is in the specificity of who
Yeah.
you are and where you come from
Hmm.
that makes your stories powerful. So what people are reacting to when you pitch is when you pitch anything, even if you're pitching a cop show, right? Very seldom are execs buying necessarily the idea, right? Everybody has an idea. What they are buying is you, right? Is
Hmm.
your passion, belief, and their sense of like, wow, that might be another cop show, but I've never heard a cop show pitched that way by this person. I believe that they can do it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's real. So believe in whoever you are
Yeah.
and what you bring to the table.
And it comes back to that thing of your truth, right? You're
Yeah.
writing your truth. Don't make it fit what you think other
Yeah.
people want. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. You're the
So,
only one that can write your truth. So, you
right.
know,
So your
yeah.
show gets greenlit. What
Yeah.
happens now? Do you have to make a decision of what role you're going to take in it?
No, 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 no. I was always gonna show run my show. Some of this stuff is decided early on contractually. So I said like, if you're a writer who creates a show but doesn't have showrunner experience, your contract will say that early on, right? That they will bring
Right.
somebody in to help you through. So, my show got greenlit specifically Washed in Black after almost 2 years of work. It was a lot of work to get this show here. That work included several months writing the pilot script, and sort of, well, first and foremost, it involved selling the show. So the development of Wash and Black went something like this, really, really in brief. Late 2018, my manager sends me SC's novel to read and find to be absolutely fantastic, right? Early 2019, I'm still involved. I have a bunch of movie deadlines. I can't really work on it yet until like spring of 2019. Spring of 2019, myself, Sterling K. Brown, who's the producer on it, and Anthony Hemingway, who was the first director, take it to the studio. See, in television, you have two corporate entities. You have a studio and you have a network. In film, you only have one, right? So in TV, it's the people who pay for the thing and the people who distribute it, right? So
Right.
your show might be on Warner Brother Television Studio, but NBC Network, right? So you go to
Hmm.
studio first, right? Because that's who's going to pay for it. And so we took the pitch up to 20th, pitched it, they loved it. 20th now bought the project as a studio. So then later on in the summer, the next step is now that we're at studio is to take it to networks, right? Where who's gonna put this show out, who's gonna distribute it. So now once again, it's a pitch process, and this is me, taking out the pitch, with all our producers. It's like 10 people, on our side, and five people on network. So it's a big room, right? You're pitching the show. And so we ended up pitching the show on the network side to, because 20th is, you know, a lot of stuff in Hollywood R&D's closed, close ecosystems, right? So if you're at Warner
Hmm.
Brothers TV, you're working with the networks that are associated with that company. So HBO Max, HBO, so on and so forth. Same thing now with with Fox, since they've been bought by Disney, you're just working with the networks in there. So that meant we were pitching to FX, Big Fox broadcast channel, and Hulu. Those were our networks. Because it was just three of them, I thought we could do it in one day, which I don't advise anyone doing. Pitching, having one pitch session wears you out. you know,
Yeah.
I'm just a glutton for punishment, and I was really busy, so I said I got to just put them all in one day, and we're just gonna go for it. So we pitched FX, Hulu, and Fox all in one day. They all went extremely well. There's a phrase we use in Hollywood in pitches to say that someone bought the pitch in the room, which is basically when they say, when you're done, gotta have it. Don't care how much, like we gotta have it. So we sold it basically to all three of those networks, and then it was a matter of who would be the best partner, and we decided that Hulu would be the best partner.
Mhm.
So by the end of 2019, we were officially on board now with Hulu in development, right? So now that means I have to now go write a pilot script, right?
Right.
So I then start that pilot script at the end of 2019, and this takes several months. This takes me until I would say May of 2020. Development can be a process. For me, I wrote three versions of the pilot that were completely different. Trying to find sort of the right shape of the show to sort of satisfy everyone. That's a part of the process where most projects die, right?
Yes.
Sort of in pilot stage. But I wrote a pilot that everyone responded to. Then it was time to now open up the writers' room, to write some more scripts. So we started the
Mhm.
writers' room summer 2020. That room ran until the end of 2020. During the course of that room, we wrote the first 5 episodes. Now you have your first sort of check-in process, right? It's sort of like you can get the green light now. For some people, sometimes you have to come back and do some more stuff, which was the case for us. We had to come back and do some more stuff. Also, by now the pandemic is hitting, so
Yeah.
a lot of things are sort of shifting and changing in the business. So we come back in where we address some things. We spend another several weeks in the room, and then this takes us to deep into 21 summer, and then 21 summer is when we then get the official green light and series order to go to production. So since the end of last summer, pre-production starts. Which is a lot of work. So it's like
Yeah. It's
first,
nail biting all the way. So it's like because it's a lot of work, right? And
it's a lot of
and
work.
and sometimes people don't realize how much work happens to things that even die in the
Yeah,
writer's
yeah.
room, right? But
Oh my God, every stage of this is development, writers room, pre-production. Like it's all just amounts of work. I mean, for instance, like we started looking for cast last summer. It took me, I don't know, 6 months to find the lead of the show. Like a casting process that went all over the world, right? Just to
yeah,
find like one undiscovered, actor. So casting takes months. Hiring your staff takes months. Trying to figure out where can I shoot the show takes months, right? Because you gotta go, you gotta look at it, you gotta scout it, you gotta come back, you gotta go scout it again. So all of this takes months just to get to the point where we are in the last month with the cameras rolling. So
right.
it's a long
And
process.
then throw that little thing called a pandemic in there too,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
people
yeah,
having restricted
yeah,
properties that you can use and things like that.
yeah, yeah.
So, and add the cost into what it takes to have a COVID team and all that. And these
Uh-huh.
are all new things that nobody even heard of 5 years ago. This has been an absolute treat, Selwyn. And before we leave, I want to see if there's anything that you think the viewers should know before we
Yeah.
leave. Is there any last words?
Because it's Halifax in Hollywood, I will talk specifically just a little bit about, my current show, Washington Black, which is adapted from a wonderful Canadian, novelist work. And a big portion of the story is based in Nova Scotia. And we are in production right now in Iceland, where we've been for a few weeks. And our company will be moving over to Nova Scotia, and we'll be in production in Nova Scotia by April. And I'm just looking forward to spending some time in such an important part of the world, in terms of Black folk and our journey, our journey north, and looking forward to engaging the community there, Black Scotia, and you know, in ways that will serve the show and serve the community. So we're coming soon, and we're excited about it.
Well, thank you, because the doors are open, Selwyn.
All
We're all
righty.
looking forward to it and looking forward to you. And for the viewers, please remember Halifax Black Film. You can watch from the 24th to the 27th, halifaxblackfilm.com.
Love it. Love it. Thank you for having me so much, Wanita. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Selwyn. And try to take. So, are you in Iceland right now?
I'm in Iceland right now. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, listen, take good care of yourself.
All
And
righty.
and then I know we'll be chatting, sometime soon. So
Definitely.
take care of
Definitely.
everybody. We'll see you soon.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second part of our panel, Halifax Meets Hollywood, Creating a TV Series. My name is Tara Taylor. I'm the Festival Director of the Emerging Lens Cultural Film Festival, and very honored to be here with our festival buddies at Halifax Black Film Festival, our guests and you. I'm here today with Wanuri Kahiu. Wanuri is a part of a new generation of African storytellers receiving international acclaim. To date, she has written and directed 6 films. Rafiki is her second feature film. She is also the co-founder of Afro Bubblegum, a media company supporting, creating, and commissioning fun, fierce, and frivolous African art. Wanuri was named a TED Fellow in 2017 and the World Economic Forum's Cultural Leader in 2018. Welcome, Wanuri. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you. I'm telling you, like it does not do justice just to just be reading that out. Like I really want audience to celebrate you. It's really an amazing feat. Your films are beautiful. I saw a little bit of clips of Rafiki, and it moved me to tears. Love the colors and the hair and the colors of the themes that you so beautifully create story around. And I just wonder, like, what are the main creative differences between directing an episodic television and a film?
Well, I mean, there's a couple. Obviously, first, a TV series would go on for longer than 2 hours, right? So for this particular at this particular time, I'm directing 4 episodes for Washington Black, for which is going to be just such an exciting project to be working on, and I'm so privileged to be working on it. So it's different in that sense, right? Yeah. Also, in film, you have a showrunner, and it's the showrunner's show that you're there to serve. It's not your own idea necessarily. You're there to just bring out the best possible version of a storyteller's story. And yes, you're allowed your creative flair, bring in all your creativity and how you see the world, but you get to create the world, right? But
That's
you
beautiful.
walk hand in hand with you walk hand in hand with a co-creator as you're doing it, and that's the biggest difference, is that you have an opportunity to be working with somebody else as well as you create a show.
Wow, that's really beautiful. So is this actually the first time that you've directed that's not your own story? And
it's not the first time I've directed that's not my own story, but it's the first US TV show I've directed, so it's a really interesting challenge. Yeah.
Beautiful. So, and you talked about, working with the showrunner. So how closely do you actually discuss your vision and even that of the writers? Like, does that come into play anywhere?
Absolutely. When you get a series, what you do is that you sit down with your showrunner and you have a tone meeting. And in the tone meeting, you go through every scene, every line, and you ask, what is the intention behind the scene? What is the intention behind this line? and you have a conversation about what you think you can do creatively, what you think works, what you think could be improved upon. And it really is a meeting of minds and trying to figure out how to get the best from the scene. So the best for me, everybody works differently, but I'm very keen on making sure that there's tone meetings for every script that you work on, so that you, the writer and the showrunner, if the showrunner is different than the writer, have an opportunity to really, really just interrogate the show.
Wow. It's really quite a difference, couple of differences there. So what are the most important things to basically keep in mind when you are directing a TV series?
Well, first, it depends on which episode you're directing, right? So if you're coming in and you're shooting the pilot episode, you are the person who's determining the look and feel of the project. You're the one who introduces the world, right? And if there's multiple directors on a project, the other directors come in to support the vision that has been created by the pilot director, right? Yeah. So sometimes you can see, we've all seen very, very stylistic shows. A good example is Shonda's work, Shonda Rhimes' work. And the work that she does through Shondaland. So you'll see that there's a very stylistic piece for Scandal, and it has a very particular look. And any director who comes in after that has to sort of mimic that look, so that the whole show feels seamless, you know? But however, there are other showrunners who push directors to come in with different visual styles. So it really depends on the show and the episodes that you're directing and the overall style. But the point of working as a team of directors on one show is to not only bring in some of your flavor to add to this overall story, but also make sure that the audience has an experience of a seamless show that runs one through to the end, you know?
Okay.
That they feel that they're part of one world. They feel absorbed and the characters are giving the platform that they deserve in order to tell the story.
Wow. Yeah, it's that's extremely important because you don't want the audience being like, what happened? So you mentioned that in Shonda's style, that if someone comes behind her, then they would have to mimic that style. So I first asked, how many series is in Washington Black, or how many episodes?
And this is a mini series. So this is going to be a really interesting project, because there's two primary directors. There's myself, Wanuri Kahiu, and there is Maurice Marable, or Mo Marable, who's another amazing director. And so the two of us are the ones who are doing most of the episodic work on the show.
Okay.
So we've been collaborating very carefully. We created a lookbook together. We talked about how we wanted the show to look, to feel. We really talked about the emotional heartbeat with Selwyn, the showrunner of the whole show, and how what we feel could elevate the show, you know? So this is truly a Pan-African collaboration, I have to say, of creating this show, you know, because all of us have come in from different parts of the world, you know, to contribute to this story, and all of us have a different point of view coming in, you know. We have figured out the look, the feel, the visual style, the story, as a team, and that's truly the best thing that you could ever have.
Well, I mean, that's brilliant, and it makes sense just because of the travels of the character in the story themselves, you know. So it makes sense that behind the scenes you're coming together to make sure all those styles mix around the world, just to match up with those adventures. I basically like, when you're thinking about the differences between directing for episodic television versus feature narrative, are there any kind of slight differences other than the working with the showrunner? Are there any other kind of differences there?
I think they are. I mean, when you have an idea, right? An idea will tell you whether it belongs as a film, or as a TV series, or as a web series. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's many different I think if you think about it, if you think about these different strands of storytelling as like different types of painting. So you can have an impressionist artist, you can have a surrealist artist, but you have different palettes to use when telling a story, right? So some things work best as a web series. Some things work best as a film. Some things work best as TV, right? We're moving into a TV and film are really beginning to merge because we're seeing these absolutely cinematic stories that are being told, and they kind of feel like a 9-hour film. Rather than, you know what I mean? So I think there is a bit of a merge, but truly in the sense of the differences, I think that the formats are slightly different. When you're telling a story in TV, you're setting it up so that while there is an overall arc, each show has its own kind of like momentum and arc within itself. So it has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yes.
Right? Whereas a film has just one arc, one beginning, middle, you know? So you go through a 3-act structure per episode in a TV show that all marries with an overarching arc, right? Whereas in film, you're just servicing 1 3-act, you know? And that's a really simplistic way of saying it. But I think that also lends itself to how you pace, how you create, how you tell a story, how you sit with characters. Because in TV, you get to sit with characters for a lot longer than in film. So in film, we might not get the essence, and we might even get to know people. But in TV, we live with them. We truly kind of live with them for a while. So it's like meeting a friend. It's figuring out how much information or data, how much information you give out, and how much you pass along. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's also just the character and how the character develops in shows.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, Wanuri, I once heard you say in an interview way back, I think you were talking about Rafiki, and that you realized at 16 years old that you wanted to create. So I would like to just dig into that a little bit. What is it about this particular medium that draws you in? Like, what is it about this process that draws you into directing and just wanting to be in this industry?
Well, I believe I'm a storyteller, and I don't believe that I am anything special, truly. I think that we've all come from a lineage of storytellers in different ways, you know? And I found that I was most drawn as a child to living in stories, either being a bookworm or being a telly addict. And those things really kind of like drove how I spent time. I spent a lot of time in my imagination. And also my mother had a very, very active imagination, which also helped. But when I realized, I think for me it was a realization at 16 that people make TV. It never occurred to me that people create content. And when I realized that was a possibility, that's all I wanted to do, and I started to pursue that possibility with everything that I could. So I just think of myself as in the lineage of storytellers since the beginning of time. I just consider myself the next in line to serve a story. And especially I really want to work in service of story of people of color. Because I think that we're deserving of telling stories in a very particular way. I think we need to be very careful because our image has so been corrupted and destroyed for many other people's agenda. And I'm very conscious when it comes to working in stories about people of color to make sure that there's kindness, there's hope, and there's joy. Because even at our worst, we need to see ourselves in the possibility of that being true and that we're living that in very everyday. So I was not only drawn to storytelling. Once I realized the power of story, I was drawn to very
Wow.
And that's all I live in service.
That's beautiful. And it goes to show, it shows in your work, it shows how passionate you are about what you're, the project you're currently working on, at each time that you're doing that you're working in that process. Like, it sounds so beautiful. No wonder you're pulling up these awards. You deserve them. And just staying on that a little bit, like, can you speak to the importance of guarding your vision when you embark like on your director journey, like when you're basically telling the story of our folks, like how important is that to guard your vision if someone doesn't think that the story or the character should say this or act like that?
Well, that's determined in the script. You know what I mean? So I can read a script and decide whether or not I want to be involved in it, depending on what it's saying about the portrayal of people in the show, So that's my first thing. The first thing is if I read a script and I feel like it's not in service of what my my vision of what I want to be able to say in the world is, then I don't do it. Or if I find that I can challenge the writer to think of new ways of creating a world that I feel like I can see myself in, right? I can see my friends in, I can see my aunts and uncles in, I can see my parents in. If that's a world that they can create, then I'm happy to be a part. See what I mean? And then I move forward from there, because then I'm telling the story knowing that I can be authentic in it, right? And then whenever I have a conversation, it's from a point of view of authenticity for the character. So I don't think this person would say this because they are this kind of person. This is the kind of personality that they are. This is the kind of way that they move. Or what if they do this instead, because it will lead to more tension in their relationship with somebody. It's a great setup for what we pay off later on in the show. So any conversation that's had as part of a team comes from an understanding of character, an understanding of how they move in the world. And then everything, I always start with character. I always start with people. And once you have an understanding of that, you even know what color their rooms will be, because you have an understanding, and you move through there. You move like that.
That's deep. That's deep. That's deep. So just to round off a little bit and to end off on, I just kind of want to talk about your theme. So you've explored love themes, you've explored sci-fi even. Do you think there's any more themes that you might be interested in exploring, like horror or anything like that?
I'm not interested in horror. I'm interested in Black joy and Black.
Yes.
And sometimes I work outside of that. You know what I mean? But everything that I do is joyful and hopeful first.
Yes.
That's my interest. Anything that is that serves that, because if we don't see ourselves as people experiencing joy and being hopeful and curious about our future, then how do we know we're deserving of it? Yes. And for me, it's really about creating spaces that my children can say, this is what my mother thinks. Yeah. This is what my mother feels. This is, you know what I mean? Yeah. I'm in service of a lot more people than just my ego. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. So, Wanuri, I'd love to know, what are the best qualities in a showrunner from a director's perspective?
Well, I can't speak for all directors. I can only speak for me. And I find that any showrunner who is willing to collaborate and who believes and supports your vision, right? And you can come together as a team and discuss ideas, storylines within the context of the show, and you feel like you're a creative collaborator in service of their work, but a creative collaborator. That's the best kind. And I have to say, that has been my experience already working with Selwyn Hinds, who's the showrunner of Washington Black.
Beautiful. It has been an honor just spending this time with you. Thank you so much for your time. Wanuri, I have followed your career for a little bit now, and I'm just so in awe. I'm sure our viewers are just inspired by your work, and your heart really does come out in your work. So I just wanted to know that. And I've been following your work in your interviews, and I've seen these earrings before. Those are beautiful earrings. I saw you had this beautiful ring of Africa. Do you still have that ring?
I do.
Oh, so just thank you again for your time. I hope you all have enjoyed this time with Wanuri. And Wanuri, just congratulations on the current project, and we hope that it comes on real soon.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Take care.